Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Sunday Drive. I'm so glad you could join me today. Today we're going to discuss 3 mistakes not to make when building a car. I kind of wanted to make this video as a follow-up to the video I made on Wednesday, the 2-year ownership review of this high mileage hero. But I was running out of run time on that video because it was pretty long. So today we're going to discuss the prospect of modifying a car, you know, do's and don'ts, and I'm going to kind of tell you about some of the experience I've had while modifying this car. So let's go ahead and hop on the road. Sorry for no POV today, guys. My nose is still a little bit sore from the surgery. Hopefully in the next week or two we can start doing POVs again. But the topic of today's video is 3 things not to do when building a car. I do want to first start off by defining what do I mean by building a car. Building a car as in modifying it, making it your own. So whether that be like this car as an example, I built this as a daily driver that I can take to the track, perform well, and drive home without too much of an NVH concern, right? Maybe your build is you lower the car, welded the diff, gave it some camber, right? That's a drift build. You want to go drift it. Or maybe you just put some wheels on it and springs and you just wanted whatever the car was but lower, right? That's a build. For the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that you're doing a build that wants you to touch a lot of different parts of the car. So you got a big build, right? You're altering drivetrain, doing suspension, whatever. For number 1, that is going to be not to let too many people's hands touch your car. So what do I mean by that? I mean, don't take your car to a bunch of different shops if you don't have to. Now, if you do all your own work, your own labor, this one doesn't apply to you. You already know everything that's happened to your car. Perfect. You're in an ideal scenario. Unfortunately, the rest of us are not as lucky, and we need to rely on shop labor, sometimes due to time, space, whatever, right? So being mindful of who your car has gone to and trying to minimize the amount of different people it goes to. The reason for this, there's a few reasons, but one of which is warranty work, especially from different shops. Say one screwed up, right, but you don't realize it until a little while later. If you only bring your car to this one shop, right, you can go back to them and say, hey, you guys screwed up. And usually if they're a reputable shop, they'll acknowledge their mistake, be like, oh yeah, we screwed up, and then they'll fix it for you, right? Now let's say you've only been to this shop once, you think it's their fault, but you don't really know, the car's been to 2 other shops. Well, now you can't go and bring it back to them because the car's been to different shops, right? You can't get a warranty on that work because other hands have touched it. So even if you think you know that it was their fault, you know, who's to say, right? So for that reason, you definitely should have one shop. And then also, having one shop only means that only one hands are touching your car, right? The person that's working on it knows what's happened to your car, what's been going on with it, what have you done, right? They've done all the work to it. So if you bring it in there for an issue, not only are they gonna be able to diagnose it faster, but they're going to be able to fix it faster because they know everything that's happened to it. It really is just a win-win by only having one person work on the car. And then if it is someone reputable, like a reputable shop that you trust, then you're going to have no issues anytime your car breaks. If you can't do the work yourself, you have to bring it to them. You don't have any anxiety over bringing your car to the shop. You know they're going to do a good job, right? They're going to give you an estimate. You're going to pay them. You're going to leave happy. Your car's going to be fixed. So for those reasons, I would say definitely try to limit as many hands as you can. But sometimes you are going to have to bring your car to a shop, you know, whether maybe it's body paint work, because not everyone can do everything, right? And just when you do, you know, find someone good, someone you trust, and just keep bringing it back to them. Number 2 on the list is going to be modifying your car too fast. We all have this habit. We have a build. We're like, oh, we know what we're going to do. And then you go out, you do it, and you do it way too fast. I totally did this in my car. I made a 4 to 5 year build get done in 1.5 to 2 years. And when you do that, it stresses yourself out because, for one, you weren't ready financially, generally, to do all that work on such a short period of time, but also your car's just being worked on all the time. You never get to drive the thing, right? So you just become very frustrated. You know, with this car, one of the things that I got drawn into was the while you're in there work. There is a time and place for while you're in there work. Say you're doing an oil pan gasket, right? On these cars, the combination is oil pump down. Sure, do it while you're in there, right? Super easy, whatever. But let's say you have this same job, oil pan gasket, front subframe is off. Now you're like, oh, maybe I'll do some motor mounts. Sure, whatever. The front subframe is off. It's really easy to do motor mounts. If you need them, go ahead and do them. But now let's say you're like, oh, let's do a steering rack. Let's do power steering lines. Do tie rods. Do this, do that. Right now, you're just opening up the Pandora's box of car maintenance. There's only so much you should really be doing at a time. And sure, if the car needs those things, go ahead and do them. But if you're just throwing money at the car for no reason, the parts aren't needed, you're just gonna exhaust yourself from this car build, right? You're gonna build it way too fast. I did this with my rear suspension. I didn't need those rear suspension parts, but I really wanted to do the polyurethane subframe bushings because I thought originally the subframe bushings were bad, but then the shop told me, no, it's just your ball joints, right? And they asked me, you know, do you still want to do all that? And I said, yeah, because I was already said, like, I want this. But really what I should have done, instead of spending $3,800 on doing a rear suspension overhaul, I probably could have spent $1,000, maybe $1,500, and just did the ball joints, maybe diff bushings, right, a couple of the other smaller items, and then left the big subframe job for down the road. That would have been the smarter move. Instead, I overextended myself way too much. I went ahead and did all this maintenance right away that the car didn't need. I ended up replacing a lot of parts the car didn't need, and then neglected a lot of the things that the car actually did need. Because, I mean, at that point in time, I still had my cooling system issue, which was a big no-no, right? And then because I had spent all this money on the rear suspension, I now couldn't afford to pay the same shop to go and fix my cooling system, all the leaks that the first guy left behind when I took it to the one shop that, by the way, is currently now out of business. Whew, that was a mouthful. But I digress. Definitely don't build the car too fast. Just enjoy the car, drive it, and then by also building the car slower, you'll get to enjoy the car at different stages in the build. And you can reminisce on how the car felt at different points in time, right? And if you do it one part at a time, you understand the difference that each part has made to the car, and overall you just have a better understanding of the car itself. We're gonna go for a little bit here. Yeah, don't build your car too fast. It doesn't work. It never ends up well. You'll exhaust yourself before you're even done with the build, and you'll end up selling the car and regretting the whole experience. Now on to number 3 on the list, and this is probably the most important one. I kind of touched on it just a little bit ago, is maintenance before mods. I know all of us, we want to make our cars lower, we want to make it faster, whatever, but if your car is broken, if it has issues with it, no matter how many mods you do, are not going to compensate for the core issues that your car currently has. Say you have a vacuum leak, right? And you're like, oh, let me go ahead and do an intake manifold, right? To go add horsepower. Yeah, you might get some power to the intake manifold, but you haven't fixed the vacuum leak. So your car's still, there's no point. You probably would have gained more horsepower just by fixing your vacuum leak, right? Things like that. Coilovers. Let's say you have a bad rear ball joint, right? You're like, oh, let me go ahead and put coilovers on it, even though I have a bad ball joint, right? Well, what ends up happening is you'll throw the coilovers on, and then your car's going to handle like garbage, and you're actually going to amplify the handling issues that the car has, because now you're putting a lot more stress on the worn out part in the suspension. So what you'll do is you'll save up some money, you'll spend all of it in your coilovers, and then now you realize the ball joint is now like an actual safety issue, not just a worn out part. You can't afford to fix it because you just spent all your money on coilovers, which is a big no-no, and frankly something I think a lot of us car people do more often than we probably should or care to admit. Just something to keep in mind. I can tell you from my experience of quote-unquote building this car, the maintenance I've done to it have made a bigger difference in how the car drove and felt over the mods I've done. Yes, doing like the rear suspension overhaul, a lot of that I did upgrade to poly, but a lot of the ride benefit that I was getting and the handling benefit was just because I did the ball joints, because the upper ball joints were bad, right? Yes, the diff and subframe bushings helped, but really the maintenance part of that is what made the car feel a lot better. Control arms is something else I did. I upgraded the shifter, which is something else I did, and it felt a lot better. But the reason it felt a lot better is because before I did the shifter upgrade, the shifter was like, it felt like neutral in every gear. Yeah, anything is better than that. Literally anything. I mean, that wasn't just worn out parts. That was actually missing a part. There's a dowel pin, but I digress. Maintenance will always make more of a difference than mods will. Because if your car just doesn't work, it's not going to perform like it's supposed to. And your mods are simply just going to be a band-aid for the actual issue. Not to say that doing mods as you're doing your maintenance is a bad thing. You can definitely do that, especially if it's while you're in their work. But you just kind of have to figure out where to draw the line and like what makes sense, what doesn't. You know, topping off coolant in your BMW isn't badass just because it doesn't make it badass because you have a cold air intake on it, right? And it sounds cool when you blow up on it. You're still putting coolant in the thing. So like, what was the point of your cold air intake, right? The same money, you probably could have just rebuilt your cooling system on your E36, and that'll make you enjoy the car way more than a cold air intake because you're not putting coolant in it all the time. But anyway, that wraps up this rant, everyone. I wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of mistakes that I made, and I see people doing it every day, and it kind of just, I don't know, it almost kind of upsets me, but I don't really get that upset because I did it too, and like I understand why people do it. But definitely there are just these things that I feel like, these rules, I guess, that people should follow more often, myself included. I'm, you know, also not immune to this, which can just make your car hobby experience a lot more enjoyable and a lot better. With all that said, everyone, though, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sunday Drive. This is a bit of a shorter one. Just kind of wanted to get something out there. Next week, you're going to get to see this car being tracked. Well, as of the time I'm filming this, it hasn't been tracked yet, but you will see it next week from this video. Anyway, make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.